So let's talk about a biological route and a biological explanation for effects in the brain for PTSD and CPTSD. Which as time goes on, I start to think it's the same thing. If you've got PTSD, you're probably going to have CPTSD. If you've got the CPTSD, you'll have the classical PTSD symptoms as well. There's no reason why CPTSD and PTSD people can't be talking. What caused it might look very different, but the effects are too similar for us not to start saying, dude, this is really similar. You're all going to end up looking like you have borderline personality disorder. You're all going to look like you have, serious attachment issues, fear of isolation, fear of being abandoned, emotions that run away with themselves, really warped, twisted views of reality at certain times. And then at other times you're fine. This is why it's called emotional dysregulation, and this is why it drives you crazy and why it drives the people crazy around you. Because you're up and down, because you're not always in a consistent state. But there is a brain level explanation for this. So what I'm about to do is I'm going to just explain to you an idea, and let me start with a caveat. This is not good science. I have been looking at the scientific literature. Even the biological stuff, I can't, it's all those long words, it freaks me out. No, seriously, I find it hard. I find it really, really tough. But here's what I've learned. The limbic system is responsible for processing that which you consider to be dangerous or not. The amygdala is responsible for processing that which perceives danger and then how we respond to it. The hippocampus, these are all bits of your brain. The hippocampus is responsible for, we think, for memory and the processing of emotion, and possibly for the way in which emotion is associated to memory. So here is what they have found using brain scanning and various methods for testing it. For people who have CPTSD and PTSD, the amygdala is excessively active, meaning that there is an internal alarm system that's going, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, the environment is dangerous. The frontal lobes become less active, so we evolved, the brain stem is here, the spine in the brain. If you're born with a medical condition and you have a spine and just a brain stem, you can live. You won't live a full life, but you can live for a while. I was reading about a case yesterday where they actually got to the age of 12 and there really wasn't much else but spine and brainstem. Oh, they couldn't see, they could barely communicate, but they lived to the age of 12. That's right, you usually would. But my point is you can survive with very little. So the brainstem has grown straight out the spine. The lizard brain, if you like. Fight or flight, reflexes, the sudden run away from danger, that which basically stops you from dying. It's not about thriving, it's not about living a happy life, it's not even particularly about going out and hunting and finding a mate and procreation and food. It's just about, shit, something's about to kill me, stop it. Very basic survival mechanism. Then it moves forward into the mammalian brain, where we got hairy, got out of the sea, started walking around on the land, grew fur so that we would not be so cold, and then it starts to be interested in more than just surviving. It starts to get interested in, sources of food and procreation and all the rest of it. This is where you will see aggression coming from. This is where you will see things like paranoia and a sense of that which is mine and me, and more of a boundaried way of looking at the world. And then you have that then grows forward into the human brain, which is the frontal lobes, which relatively speaking in evolutionary terms haven't been around for that long, which is interesting. And the second thing is the rate of growth of the human brain, which had an unprecedented explosion in its volume capacity in nature. Nothing in nature that we are aware of grew its brain so rapidly over such a short period of time as humans did. Because that's when the aliens did experiments and they bred with us and it made it, I'm kidding, or am I? So what's happening is when you have trauma is I used to teach this to kids when they'd go into exams and they panic over the exam. They sit there, they look at the maths exam, they have so much tension about it. Blood is now not flowing to the frontal lobes. It's all receding back to the reptilian brain stem and into their body and into their guts to help them to go to the bathroom and run away and to run or to smash somebody's head in. But you know, I joke with the kids and be like, but you can't get up and smash your maths teacher's head in with a rock. It's not the solution to a maths exam. It doesn't create an awesome life. So we have these very, very primal responses which fight with the human response, and that's what we've got with CPTSD and PTSD. And there's actually a brain function there. So this one particular paper said that the hippocampus actually kind of atrophies over time with disuse. And what causes that, what can potentially cause that atrophy, is an extended exposure to stress. So the hippocampus, the volume of the hippocampus, according to what this research indicates, and I'll leave a link below, says that the hippocampus shrinks physically. It's like a muscle that's not being used and it starts to shrink down. I'll shut this window. Or we shall have the sound of the cars outside, which will induce stress. Now, what this means is that your ability to process memory and emotion is physically diminished. So when you have people with PTSD and CPTSD, and their therapists or family or friends or people giving them shit advice on forums or on Facebook are telling them to fucking buck up, get their ideas, pull it together, blah, 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 and all the rest of it. This is very frustrating. It would be like telling somebody whose legs had atrophied due to being in a trauma, in a coma for a few months, to just get up and, you know, run around. The physical muscle isn't there. The will to get better is there, but the physical muscle isn't there. The hippocampus is actually shrunk. So the ability to, doesn't it feel with PTSD and CPTSD like there's a blockage? What if, this is poor science by the way, so don't be touting this around the internet going, this guy said, no, don't do that. What if, I'm suggesting, what if the block is that the brain physically lacks, because of the extended exposure to stress, whether that was in warfare, the violence and trauma of war, or through being stuck in an emotionally and psychologically abusive environment, shrank the hippocampal volume, and now your ability to process memories and process emotion is actually flaccid and like a bicep that's not worked, and it's just weak now. That would suck, because I'd be saying to you, you need to process your memories, and you're like, I can't, they're stuck there. I keep thinking of this, and then the amygdala is fired off, and then the blood's gone from the frontal lobes, and it's all in the fucking limbic system, and I'm looking for somebody to kill, or I'm trying to run away. Isn't that similar to what we talk about when people are stuck in flashbacks? Be they the PTSD standard flashbacks of the memory just firing, where you experience yourself, you know, the IED goes off, the sniper rounds are coming in, and you can hear the sound of the round zinging past you. These are the descriptions that I've read. So they can still feel like the rounds like going past their head. And it's a very, if you could, like, for people who have not been in such a scenario, if you could imagine a more visceral threat than that, I can't do it. It's tough for me to do. And that sort of sense of any moment now, I'm next to this vehicle, my brains could be on this vehicle. That is, you know, humans are supposed to do, maybe we're set up to do that for maybe like 5 minutes in an entire lifetime. That level of threat. Like, I could die now any second, maybe for 3 to 5 minutes in one lifetime. These are guys who've had to do it every day for long tours of duty, and they're seeing other people just like them, other guys and girls, just like them, are being killed in that scenario. So that is going to massively activate the amygdala, massively overactivate the adrenal response and the limbic system. And it's apparent, this is the new thing, it's actually going to fuck up the hippocampal volume. It's going to shrink the hippocampal volume. So your ability, it's trauma. Like, I think it could be that things are just shutting down. Maybe the brain thinks, we're going to die. We're going to die now. There's no need to process emotion. There's no need to access memories. Memories for what? We'll be dead soon. And you stay in that state, And you're actually going to have the same emotional, biological effect as, say, a woman who's stuck in a situation of domestic violence, or a child who's stuck in a situation of domestic violence. Is tonight the night that daddy's going to come home and stamp on my head and kill me? Is tonight the night that mum is eventually going to come good on her threats and lock us in a shed and burn us alive, or drown us in these kinds of things, okay? So very, very high levels of threat. We're not talking about moderate levels, of like extreme levels of threat. Here's the good news. The hippocampus, it has been shown, can increase in volume through the use of therapy, just standard talk therapy, like, you know, CBT or you know, standard counseling. Why? Well, because that muscle, it's not a muscle, this is poor science, guys, but let's say it is. It's just for the sake of argument. This is a piece of machinery in the system has been damaged. It's fucked up. It's weak now. But if I'm doing counselling with you and I'm an okay counsellor, and provided we have rapport, I'm talking old school counselling now. You respect me and you understand that I understand your problem and you're open with me and we have rapport. That's step number one. If you don't have that, you're fucked. You may as well just give up, because standard counselling won't do anything. It will just annoy the client if you don't have that in place. But say we do, and I'm saying to you, not just, say you're a combat veteran and I say to you, don't just tell me about the incident that was most terrifying, tell me about the good times. Tell me about camaraderie with your friends, that time that you all got drunk and did a dance, or, you know, in your training, something funny that happened, or tell me about your childhood. Tell me about things that you enjoyed when you were a kid. Tell me everything. And you're accessing memory and you're accessing emotion by default. There isn't, as far as I'm aware, a system of therapy or counselling that says encourage the patient to access memory for memory's sake. There are, of course, systems of therapy and counselling that say encourage the patient or the client to access their emotions for emotion's sake. So I've been focused on this a lot recently. Like, we've got to get into emotions. People, the standard misdiagnosis of borderline, and that certain types of CPTSD like freeze and flight in CPTSD tend to be very much associated with a dissociative attitude and stance to the emotions. Let's get back into the emotions. And then I started doing more research and I was like, oh, emotionality is really cool. Emotions and physicality, moving your body in new ways across new planes of movement, new stretches, new strength movements, all of that has been shown to increase neuroplasticity. Well, duh, of course it does, because your brain is doing something new. Every time you do new things, your brain becomes more flexible. Neuroplasticity increases. Similarly, emotionality is associated with neuroplasticity. What I've not seen yet, but would be interesting to look at, is the accessing of memories might increase neuroplasticity. Meaning, not just the standard accessing of memories where you play it in the same way every time to freak yourself out and have an anxiety attack, but your ability, imagine it in a muscular sense, to process and access a memory. So how would we do that? Why does the therapy increase hippocampal volume? Standard therapy, when it works, if it works, will increase hippocampal volume because you'll be increasing the ability of the client to, in a calm, safe, rational state, go back and access memories and expand upon them. Now, I don't want to go off too far here, stick with me. I remember from when I used to study hypnotherapy a lot more, and I've used hypnotherapy since the age of 20. I've been using it on and off for 17 years. And I was predominantly using it for how can I teach people new skills really quickly, just take a skill and install it. There was another way of approaching the hypnosis that I thought was interesting, that was more to do with like going back into the past and finding stuff out. And every piece of research that I'm aware of shows that the more you do it, the better you get at it. So if I say to you, do you remember anything about your 6th birthday party, or you know, your earliest memory from, let's just stay with 6th birthday party, okay? Maybe you've still got a picture of that, or somebody in your family still has a picture of that, and you go back and you access as much of that as you can. In the initial response of 6th birthday party, yes, say we get a memory recall of 5 units. If you stick with it, because of the way the brain operates, it's a computer and it's a question answering machine, the more time you give it to access data, the more data it will find, but it can't find it all instantly. In NLP, they call this a transderivational search. So if I say to you, go back and think of your 6th birthday, think of the house you lived in, think of the friends you had, Think of like how tall you would have been in that house. So the house would be huge because you'd be little. You'd be looking around how big your mum and dad looked, where you were, what was going on at the time. You will get better at accessing that one memory instantly within the next 60 seconds. I don't even need to put you in a trance. We just sit there and we go, is there anything else you can remember? Is there anything else you can remember? Is there anything else? And you might remember, like for me, I just got a flash then. What would I remember? I would remember the couch from that house in Bebington I used to live in and how it felt. Like I would remember how that felt. I would remember my grandfather's face suddenly just comes out. All of this and the brain stuff. And it's almost like it uses these little pieces of memory as hooks. So it's going reach. Oh, grandfather's face. Okay, what else? Oh, okay, and then the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. The more you do that, the more you're practicing accessing memory and accessing the emotions associated to that memory. The more you practice memory, the more you practice associating the good memories. They don't have to be bad. There's like this fallacy in therapy that all memories have to be bad. By this model, I would be saying to people, don't bother with bad memories. Why feel bad if you have the choice to feel good? Let's just go through good ones that made you feel good. Whilst you're doing that and feeling good and accessing these good memories and using emotional adjectives to describe what feelings you have associated with those memories, what you're actually doing is you're increasing your hippocampal volume, he said, knowing that this is not good science and that he can't prove it. It's just that some research indicates that this might be true. If it is, let's jump to the next conclusion based on the assumption I just made. If you're stuck with CPTSD or you're stuck with PTSD and you can't process what happened and you can't move on because there's a lack of digestion of the traumatic event, it could be, let's imagine now the amygdala is a piece of an engine. It's a valve in the engine. It's the same way as like a valve within the digestive system. If one valve you have in your digestive system, a stupid number of valves, they're called sphincters, but I don't know, it's definitely more than 20. If one of them breaks or closes, you have a very serious problem because it's a one-way system, you know, or at least it should be. And any stoppage there is going to cause a system lockdown, and it can kill people. One of my friends, he died quite young because of that, because of morphine. He was being given morphine for the illness that he had. He was in a lot of pain, and that's what killed him. Was the system just locked up, which is what happens with morphine over time. The entire system starts to just lock up, and you're not processing any food anymore. And food that's not processed in the body, well, I'm sure you can imagine what happens over time. Eventually, things split. So, in terms of it being a valve, let's imagine the seahorse. The hippocampus is a valve, and you have this memory that needs to be processed, but the valve has shrunk through stress and through trauma. It has to be extended. It has to be extreme levels of stress over a period of time, like being stuck in an abusive environment, an abusive childhood, an abusive family, or stuck in a combat zone for a very long period of time. It shrunk. So it can't, this is a big, heavy memory with a lot of emotion, but the amygdala has shrunk. What I'm suggesting, again, not science, but that you work it and you can actually grow its ability to safely and organically and healthily process emotions. And this big thing that's been sat there, rotting, not moving through the system, can now go through. And in that processing, you have a healing. You get to move on. Your brain gets to go, yes, that happened to me. Yes, it was traumatic. Yes, it was awful. But actually, over a period of time, it doesn't hold me back. It doesn't stop me from living today. Because this has been one of the questions that I've had in my head is, if a prime directive of the organism that we are is survival, why would we process trauma in such a way that can actually kill us? Because over a long enough period of time, this stuff kills you. PTSD and CPTSD, all the research indicates if it's not treated, it gets worse over time. Two things will happen: slow suicide or fast suicide. Fast suicide is, I go jump off a bridge. Slow suicide is, yeah, I'm alive, but I'm not living. I'm still putting food in my mouth. I tie my shoelaces up. I go to work if I really have to, and I give the minimum. That's why Pete Walker called his book CPTSD From Surviving to Thriving. We're in survive mode. I'll keep eating, I'll keep going, but really the only reason I don't kill myself is because I'm the idea of how much pain it would put my family in just stops me. I've been there. I've lived that. I was like, looked over. I hate heights, but I look over the big height regularly, way too regularly, and then just going, but it's going to cause a lot of people like so much pain. I really shouldn't do it. That's a weak reason to live. That's a really bad place to be in. So why does that happen? Well, this could be an answer to that. There's actually something that is blocking the system, a kind of emotional constipation, if you will, because one of the valves in the engine has gotten damaged. It just can't process fuel anymore. It can't fuel the engine anymore. So you drift through. So you're alive, but just barely. And I lived like that for 5 years. I lived like that for probably about 5 or 6 years. It was a disgusting, horrible, painful, torturous experience. And then when I got better, people could say, well, how did you get better? How did you cure it? I'm like, I don't know, but that could have been one of the ways. There were things that I was doing that by default, by mistake, would have allowed me to process my emotions and to process the memories in such a way that allowed me to move forward. One of the things that can help is talking to other people about this subject. Can help, not will help. So you can't just take a room of combat veterans, have them talk to each other and then expect everybody to get better, but some do, the research indicates, but they can't tell why. They're like, well, why did he get better from this and he didn't? And then they start going, well, it's a genetic predisposition to, it's not. I refuse. I'm really stubborn. I don't like genetic determinism. It's if that person permitted themselves to see themselves through other people's stories. I will finish with this one thing whilst we're talking on things that could help, and why they help might not be the reason why we think they do, but they do help. One of the ways that has been shown to help people who've been the victims of childhood sexual abuse, which when I heard it, I was like, that's counterintuitive. I would think that would have the opposite effect, was that the person who experienced the childhood abuse would write down the experience of what happened and how they felt about it, and then their therapist would read it back to them. A, that sounds like, hello, I'd like to be re-traumatized, and B, too weak. To my brain, I was like, that can't work, it's too weak. But what is actually happening is you're being permitted to externalize the problem, and you can hear it from somebody else's point of view as though it's their memory. So what you're actually doing is you're flexing the muscles of emotionality, of how you actually can feel for somebody else who's been through that. That somebody else is you, by the way. What does Pete Walker say is one of the essential ways of getting over CPTSD, and therefore PTSD by default? Self-compassion. I can't feel compassion for myself because in my childhood I was told I wasn't supposed to have needs, and every time I feel compassion for myself I'm full of guilt and shame and think I'm being a self-indulgent crybaby because that's what my crazy father or mother told me was true. Self-compassion. So you experience your pain as though it's the pain of another person, and you give them the compassion that you refuse to give yourself, but then you're caught in a double bind because then you go, but that was me, so that's why it works. So you're actually, what are you doing? You're hearing the memory through, it's your memory, but through somebody else's voice and through somebody else's perspective as though it happened to somebody else. And apparently it works even better when it's an opposite gender therapist. So I would describe a traumatic experience and then a female therapist would say it back to me. And I would sit and listen to another's memory, it's my memory, but my brain would be saying, well, another human is talking, so it's their memory, and feel empathy and compassion for them, process those emotions by proxy, and guess what? You start to get better. It didn't work all the time in every case, of course not, but the success rate was really high. Okay, so that's it. I went on a long time there. I hope that was useful. I hope you can tell that at the moment I'm doing my level best to come up with solutions and to come up with things that might actually help. I said I wanted to cure CPTSD. I want to cure PTSD as well. Why not? Why not? That's my grandiosity. That's my ego. I think that it's being able to communicate with each other and network through social media like Facebook, like YouTube, that this is what technology affords us nowadays, and that being free from the shackles of academia. I don't need to prove everything that I'm asserting. I'm saying, hey, this is an idea, let's approach it with a little bit of flexibility. Let's try it and see what happens, and that can be helpful in its own way. Okay, that's enough. Thank you very much for your time, your attention, and your patience with me, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. Thank you.